Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, a little information for you and the listeners. This is your trigger warning. We're going to be talking about horror movies, horror culture, horror literature, which could involve anything from murder, rape, suicide, child abuse, all kinds of curse words. We're going to be talking about some dark stuff. So if it's not up your alley, maybe check something else out, or take a minute to gather yourself and come back. Or if it is up your alley, listen to us talk about all kinds of fucked up shit. Woohoo! Woo, fucked up shit!
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah. Coming up, we will be interviewing podcaster Zobo with a shotgun, and I believe later on to
Zoe Smith,
yes. And later on today, or I think tomorrow, actually, we'll be interviewing director and producer of Circus of the Dead, Cowboys from Hell, and Dollboy Billy Pond. But today, we have the pleasure of having our guest, Garrett Cook, author and editor of horror and bizarro fiction, and other such novels as Archelon Ranch, Time Pimp, A God of Hungry Walls, which I like that title, and Crisis Boy. Good morning, Garrett.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Our pleasure. Anything you want to plug before we get into the meat of the interview?
Well, I think I'd like to direct your listeners to A God of Hungry Walls. It's been out for a while, but it's starting to pick up. The Spanish edition's been picking up a lot of steam, and I think that if your listeners are fans of hardcore video nasties, Clive Barker, Edward Lee, a little bit of antisocial Eurogothic, I think they'll appreciate it.
Okay,
it's abject filth.
Nice. Abject filth.
You mentioned that it's you also have a Spanish version. Just in case other listeners are curious, do you have any other language versions?
No, not yet. It's a thing I really want to get into, though, because I've had a really good experience with European publishers in general, and I like that market and I like that fan base a lot.
Okay, so English and Spanish for now, and maybe more in the future. Check back later.
Yes.
Okay. So in this interview, we'll be asking 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to find out what it is about horror that you like. The idea is that if we come at this from multiple angles, sometimes it triggers memories that you had forgotten. But that said, it's not meant to be a therapy session. So if there are any questions you don't want to answer, just say pass and we'll move on. But starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
I grew up in a house that I can't be 100% sure, but I grew up in a house that was, by all accounts of almost all of the residents, haunted, and it was a thing that made me feel a lot like an outsider. The kids who grew up around me considered our house like the devil's house.
Okay.
It was considered a very bad place. We were regarded as witches.
Really?
By many people, because we had a church seminary next town over, and this was the North Shore of Massachusetts. This is like right around Salem. It's witch country, is where I came from. That seeps into things. This feeling of otherness, this feeling of being closer to dead than living, and this feeling of pervasive wrongness and strangeness in the world.
Was it an old house?
It was a newish house on old ground that it had that crossed over with a lot of traumatic stuff.
Was the ground sour?
There was a possibility there were slaves lynched on the apple tree. There was a trolley crash right around it. It was kind of a perfect storm of
all that stuff was there before you got there.
Oh yeah, no, it was there before we got there, yes.
You guys didn't install the slave lashing tree?
No, we didn't, yeah.
Regarded you guys as witches, but you just moved in.
Yeah. No, there were kind of weird people.
Clearly, you had done your research and you were looking for a good spot to lay your coven.
Yeah, exactly. Good place to call up the Haints. Good place to meet the devil and dance in the dead of night.
Yeah.
Apparently.
I mean, I could see kids making that kind of thing, but adults.
Oh God, we got some notes. We had some crazy neighbors.
fair, but that happens everywhere. So.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, so that changed a lot of my thinking and led me to feeling like the world was a darker, colder, nastier place than the people around me thought it was, I think. And when I started watching horror films, there was a certain amount of comfort because that's what life felt like. And there was order to it, and there was justice to it, and there was sense to it, and that was cool.
Unlike real life.
Unlike real life, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, real life's just fucking nuts. It's just like a bunch of things that happen.
So when you say that horror was comfortable and felt familiar, was it because it felt familiar compared to the house or compared to how your neighbors were acting towards you, or both?
Compared to what life was like outside of my house, essentially, what the outside world felt like. It was like when I was watching a horror film, it was like, yeah, this is how life is. This makes sense to me. It's full of violence and cruelty and dead people.
So maybe a little wish fulfillment in the sense of the justice that maybe you didn't get in reality.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. There's moral order to horror. Like Stephen King talks about it as in some ways the most puritanical and Christian of genres, because there's a lot of comeuppance, there's a lot of sense, and you can always see why bad things happen to people in horror.
Yeah. Well,
with some exceptions.
Kind of. Yeah.
On the more black and white pieces anyway.
Yeah, in the more black and white pieces, and in slasher movies, definitely.
Well, yeah.
Slasher movies.
You're fucking in the woods. You're going to die.
Well, fucking period.
Yeah, there's a very there's a very simple and very weird dream causality to them. That's extremely easy to trace. Yeah, and that's and there's a certain amount of comfort there, and that's the thing I always loved about. Godzilla was my favorite as a kid, because Godzilla there's two ideas that you get at the center of a Godzilla movie. And one of them is like that nature wants to fix shit, that nature wants to clear up the nonsense we've did, and that life is going to find a way, whether we want it to or not, that there is some kind of justice. But then in the later ones, there's this interesting new idea that it's possible to be forgiven. Like we suddenly see the Earth attacked by a three-headed space dragon, and the thing that incinerated us like years before that,
it's now defending us. Yeah,
decides that okay, you get one. Don't fuck this up.
Everybody gets one.
Yeah, exactly. That's except Godzilla kind of got softer, but
yeah.
during the later Showa.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something like very, very comforting and very human and very religious about that. The idea of like a dialogue almost between an Old Testament god and a New Testament kind of god, in Mothra talking to Godzilla and them deciding that like humankind is worth saving in Ghidorah, three-headed monster.
Yeah,
and I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I never looked at Godzilla in that light, but it is similar to like biblical Old Testament or even like Roman or Greek lore, where there's a conversation between two omniscient beings of whether or not to destroy or spare humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's wonderfully laid out in what is also like just a really hilarious moment in Ghidorah, three-headed monster. Because there's the conversation between like Godzilla and Mothra, and the little twins are watching it, and one of them suddenly is like, oh, "Godzilla, such language," and that actually makes sense for an omnipotent being that's been watching us for thousands of years to be this fucking pissed.
Right.
So I haven't seen this one. Are they actually talking in English or whatever? Japanese, whatever language?
The little twins are translating the monster talk as they talk. There is a moment where Godzilla talks in Japanese to another monster and sends it out to investigate a thing in a later one, which I always find fucking hilarious. But it's not quite that silly back at Ghidorah, three-headed monster. It took him about like 7 more years to get completely off the rails goofy enough that a giant monster would be sent to investigate something. Because that's not like in their skill set. Just having spikes is what this guy usually does. They're not very
wearing
subtle.
like a classic Dick Tracy fucking overcoat and the hat.
Peeking around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, they did not get him like a trench coat and hat and like glasses and dark glasses. That would have been much better.
Yeah.
The tiptoeing would be the best part, because tiptoeing would still cause minor earthquakes. Just boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
Still crushing buildings, just, small ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so grew up in a haunted house, had some interest in Godzilla. What else impacted you at an early age?
I would say Christopher Lee as Dracula.
Okay.
The first time I ever saw Dracula in anything, like besides a Count Chocula commercial, I saw Dracula has risen from the grave. And if the first time you see Dracula, it's Dracula has risen from the grave, like, Dracula is a stone cold badass. Dracula is, like, insurmountably terrible in that movie. You've got, like, Christopher Lee with the red eyes, and he's, like, looks like he's 7.5 feet tall, because you're 6, and he's dribbling blood down his face.
I think he is that tall to begin with, but go ahead.
He was a big dude, yeah. And, like, just looks completely unstoppable and insurmountable. Just fucking awesome. Like, I love Christopher Lee Dracula for that, because he's so imposing, and he's so physical, and he's so in your face and feral all the time. Like, he's very monstery and very Transylvanian. And you don't necessarily get those kind of mannerisms from other Draculas.
Mm-hmm.
I like Frank Langella a lot. I think Frank Langella did a good job. I think Gary Oldman certainly had his moments. And
so you weren't scared by this Dracula. You wanted to be this Dracula.
I was actually no. I was fucking mortified by this Dracula. I thought Dracula like nothing's gonna put an end to Dracula. Holy shit! Like, then I saw Brides of Dracula and watched Van Helsing putting an end to these vampires, and then saw horror and got very impressed with Peter Cushing.
Okay.
Because Peter Cushing's like, he's this little dude in like a silk kimono. He's jumping on a table to physically wrestle with Dracula and repulse him with 2 candlesticks. Mm-hmm. He's like got this bite on his neck, and he's cauterizing it with a hot branding iron. So you see this thing that seems unstoppable and insurmountable, but just this little British guy in his 40s is gonna do his damnedest, and is gonna spaz around and stop Dracula. Which, if you see Dracula has risen from the grave first, looks virtually impossible. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought that was great. Like, I hoped after seeing that, like, maybe one day I could kill vampires. Then I found out there's no vampires. And then I realized, like, it'd be cooler to be a vampire, because there's no actual vampires. Like,
I mean, there's social vampires.
Oh yeah, there's definitely social vampires, yeah. There's influencers.
Emotional vampires.
That's close. Mm-hmm. And emotional vampirism.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that Cushing as Van Helsing was a really fascinating figure. Yeah. And I thought that it was just amazing that someone would try and stand up to this thing. Particularly like just a little weaselly, spazzy guy like that.
So a small pattern that I might be seeing starting here is relating to power?
Relating to power and justice, yeah.
Okay.
It was and sense. The idea that there were certain kinds of badness out there, and that you can understand them, and that you can see them coming, and that they're classified is I think very liberating for children.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I mean, when I was a kid, my favorite TV show was the Kung Fu with David Carradine, the original one from the 70s. Mm-hmm, yeah. And for me, it was the same thing. It was because a lot of the things that they said in the show made sense in a way that it seemed like none of my parents or older relatives, or even any of the kids or adults I knew in real life understood or had any relation to. Like, there was just a truth.
Kane's a good role model. Kane's a cool dude.
Yeah, that too. But not even Kane as a person, but just the logic that was talked about in a lot of the things that they said in that show. That, like you say, it made sense to me in a way that in a world that didn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, that can be said for most any fiction, horror or non. It's the escapist or the escapism in it. You know, the real world never makes sense, or it seems to just constantly either not go your way or be unpredictable in a negative connotation. Then, yeah, it's good to escape into something that makes sense for once.
I'm kind of, but it wasn't escapism in that I didn't.
I mean, minor. Yeah. Maybe escapism isn't the right term for it. Just, I don't know, peering into a window of a world that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. At least from at least from where I was at, it was just I wasn't necessarily trying to escape.
I guess for me, the word escapism has a sort of a context of I'm going to make a world that makes sense, even if it's not real. Whereas to me, this was more of a discovering a world that made sense, that I didn't create and wasn't like the one that I inhabited. And yeah, I could escape to it when I came upon it, but it wasn't one that I created, if that makes sense.
I think that modeling moral order for people is a thing that you see in horror films and in kung fu films and in superhero films, and it can help people establish their own moral order because you look at things and you encounter stuff you haven't seen or would never see, and you encounter hypotheticals you wouldn't encounter, and you say, like, this is a line I wouldn't cross. This is a line I wouldn't allow anyone around me to cross. This is a thing I don't want to see. What should I do about that? What should I do about parasitic people? What should I do about destroying the environment? What should I do about, racism? All these things. How to establish your values and boundaries. And that's really important as a kid, I think.
I definitely agree that there are some genres or some, I don't even know if genre is the right word, but there's definitely stories in horror that align with what you're saying. But then there's also a lot of horror that's exactly the opposite of where the whole point of the horror is to cross the boundaries and freak you out.
Well, yeah, the point is to show that moral order has broken down.
And more to the point to say there is no moral order and fuck your sense of desiring to have one because there's never going to be one, and now what are you going to do?
Yeah, no, definitely. Or also just saying, like, it's only there if you carry it. Like, you can only have the ground underneath your feet's yours, you're yours, but everything outside you, it's very difficult to impossible to absurd to impose moral order on. But you got you, and you got your boundaries.
Yeah. So are you also a fan of or not a fan of this other kind of horror that I'm talking about?
I'm a huge fan of it. Okay. I'm not, like, over time I developed a taste for things that were more aggressively antisocial or revealed how antisocial society is. And I think those are really important stories as well, and are also kind of tests of who we are and where we stand. A lot of my favorite films are things you survive. Like, I love Antichrist, and after watching Antichrist, I feel like this is a thing I went through. This is a thing I endured and won at the end of, and I got to have that experience and keep that with me and learn these things and feel these things.
Okay.
In exchange for getting through the onslaught. Mm. It's a journey. It's it's like kind of a harrowing of hell.
Yeah, to give them a challenge.
It's the hero's journey.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this acquired taste for these antisocial stories over time, I'm, at the moment trying to focus on childhood. I'm guessing that came later, or did that start in childhood too? Or
some of that did start as a kid. I saw Hellraiser for the first time when I was 8.
Oh, nice.
And that at first bothered me a lot and I saw The Creeping Flesh, which is less, it's less gory, definitely. It's less oversexed, definitely. And by oversexed, I'm not saying that as a value judgment. I'm saying that, like, it's a world where sexuality is, like, in focus and at the center of it, at the center of its cosmology. The Creeping Flesh is less that, but at the same time, there are only horrible people in The Creeping Flesh. There's only moral ugliness and, like, skeleton animated by Peter Cushing's pure moral turpitude and dislike for other human beings. And I thought that was really cool, but it was also a really scary idea.
Yeah.
That there was
a character
something
with
that,
nothing but malice and no good intentions at all. Just, I want to hurt people.
yeah. And
you mentioned it being both cool and scary. What did you find cool about it?
Well, what I found cool about it was this awesome skeleton walking around and killing people. That was cool. Like, when you're a kid, like, and the skeleton's walking around doing skeleton things and murdering people and shit, like, that's kind of awesome. That's just a fun thing to watch. But the actual implications of the skeleton and what the skeleton meant and what the skeleton was doing, and, like, the fact that the skeleton was intrinsically connected to this dark Peter Cushing, this anti-Van Helsing, was kind of jarring in some ways. It was just watching the idea that the supernatural don't necessarily adhere to conventional morality.
Same is also true of Godzilla, which you had brought up earlier too.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's like that kind of that kind of like existential anguish you get out of Gojira and King of the Monsters for sure. You know, there's even moments in Gojira where people are questioning God and questioning God's justice and wondering what they did to deserve this, because they've already survived a nuclear attack and this thing has come back to haunt them again. And they're just
also reminds
crying
me of
and clutching their kids.
Kind of also reminds me of some of the Greek plays from ancient Greece that.
Oh yeah, certainly.
You know, were also morality plays, but also not dissertations, but discussions about, you know, what makes sense to God doesn't necessarily make sense to a human being.
Oh, absolutely. Sophocles in Oedipus Rex famously says, "Let no man be happy if he lives."
Well, yeah.
And that's like, it's kind of a bitter pill. And then you see Oedipus Rex, and by the end of Oedipus Rex, you think, like, yeah, that checks out.
He's a lot more than unhappy.
He's so much more than unhappy. Things are so much worse. And, like, and it's only that one's just like the tip of the iceberg in even that series of plays. Things get worse in Antigone, and he's just like chilling in Oedipus Colonus, and nothing goes right from there. Just ruin. It's funny you brought up
Antigone. It's funny you brought up Antigone because Jeff Burke just posted something a couple days ago on Facebook about a cat that came into his cat grooming thing who's named Antigone.
Yeah, no, that was actually fresh on my mind when you brought up Greek drama, because that one is one of my favorites. After I like Oedipus Colonus because it's kind of an early King Lear. That's the second one of those, but Antigone really stings because it's all about political pride and all about how much we suffer for the ego and pride of our politicians and how ugly that is.
So we've got a couple different things here. Grew up in a haunted house, Godzilla, Christopher Lee's Dracula, Van Helsing. There were times that you were scared of these things, but also times that you were excited. Do you remember there being a shift from being scared to, wow, this is cool at a certain point in your life?
I think that I was kind of numb to a lot of, children are very plastic in certain ways. Like, when you're a kid, your brain, like, takes a sudden shock and then it bounces right back into shape.
Yeah.
Like, you could see something incredibly scary when you're a kid, but you're not necessarily able to, like, you know,
process it.
Yeah, you know, or order the components of the mind, or like Lovecraft says in Call of Cthulhu. That's kind of going for children. Children have that going for them. They kind of bounce back from stuff, and I think I actually I got more afraid of more things I looked at as I grew older, because I was able to understand them deeper, and I was left thinking about them more. And there were a lot of things where it wasn't necessarily the image on the screen that gave me pause. It was the ideas behind it. Like for example, like the abuse and the manipulation that goes on in Rosemary's Baby
Mm-hmm.
was way scarier than the idea of the devil or the Antichrist.
Particularly if you live in a family that is reality.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a tough idea to process, that the people around you have that much control over you, and that the people around you can manipulate you in that way.
How old were you when you saw that?
I was about 11.
Oh, wow.
That's a young age to see Rosemary's Baby.
It kind of was in some ways. There were a lot of things I didn't gather the first time I saw it, of course, but I saw it again, and I liked it fine and contextualized a lot, but it didn't have that same hit that I got the first time I watched it, because there were a lot of notions in it that got kind of heady. Like, I was actually more scared of horror with extremely heady concepts when I was that age than I was of just any physical special effect I was looking at.
So, having seen Hellraiser at 8 and Rosemary's Baby at 11, I'm curious, were your parents not paying attention to what you were watching? Did they?
Well, we had a bootleg video store inside our stairs.
Inside your stairs?
Yes. My grandfather had this friend who he would trade rare stamps for boxes of decontextualized dubbed videotapes, and he would hide the decontextualized dubbed videotapes inside our stairs. Like, our stairs were a video shelf in the basement, essentially.
That's kind of awesome. Like, did you not?
It was awesome. I saw a lot of shit I didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
I saw Weekend when I was like 11, because I saw in a month. I saw in this book on the great films that this was the most disturbing, one of the most disturbing films ever made, to the critic who wrote that. In some ways that tracks, in other ways, like, Weekend is kind of a bitter pill. But yeah, I watched Weekend because I thought, like, oh boy, I'm in for some scary shit. And ideologically, I was in for some scary shit. But the actual stuff on the screen was a lot less interesting.
And how old were you when you saw that?
That was about 10.
Okay, so you were reading reviews talking about scary shit at 10 and seeking it out.
Oh yes.
How? Why?
Because we had a book on the great films, and I read that through, and I was very fascinated with canons as a kid. I wanted to contextualize and understand and categorize ideas and explore canons, and gather as much as I could about human culture, and gather as much as I could about the arts and how to do it right. I have to know what I have to find things that excite me and engage me intellectually, because I'm not being engaged intellectually by my peers, and I was alone a lot. Like, I had friends, but my friends were not into that kind of stuff. Other than occasionally, I just find like some R-rated bloodbath thing and we watch it on sleepover, like Leviathan or some shit.
This book on great films, did that belong to your grandfather's friend too?
Oh no, that was my mother's.
Was she a fan of film in general, or horror?
Oh, she loved horror movies. We did frequently watch things like the Christopher Lee movies and whatnot. But if it was something like Hellraiser or Leviathan that was going on, like while she was at work, my grandfather would be watching me, and he'd fall asleep, and then I would traipse down the stairs and I would pick out a film to watch.
Okay, so your mom loved horror. She had this book on film.
Yeah, her favorite ever was The Brain That Wouldn't Die.
Nice.
Which is just it's so trashy and sleazy and fun. It's and actually has this deeply antisocial moral core to it that is really interesting in that particular brand of 50s horror. you've got movies like Hideous Sun Demon and The Manster, and all of those are just are just these sleazy noir type things in which a guy turns into just something hideous, or a woman develops psychokinetic powers when she's a brain in a tray.
All right, so your mom loved horror. She had this book. You were reading through it. I'm guessing she knew you were reading through it. Between that and the collection under the stairs, you had this thing that fascinated you, as you mentioned. You weren't necessarily intellectually engaged by what was going on around you, so you were kind of fascinated by this.
Yeah, I was the kind of kid who would just like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, "What's in the D volume of the encyclopedia?" I haven't read the D volume. And so I would just like, So
I was kind of like that, but I was with comic books. I don't know if I would have done the D volume in the encyclopedia.
I got that way. I got that way with comics too, like in my teen years. And then when Wikipedia came along, I occasionally read comics I haven't read on Wikipedia every once in a while still, because I'll just like get this like
the gist.
I don't know what Hawkman was up to in 1987.
The things to keep you up at night.
How the fuck am I supposed to sleep if I don't know what Hawkman was up to in 1987?
Yeah. Yes.
Not possible.
August of 1987.
Yeah, in August 1987. Yeah.
No, I can relate to that because as I've gotten older too, I've also used Wikipedia for, like Chris and I'll talk about movies, and instead of watching the movie, I'll just go read the plot because it's like I can do that in 5 minutes and then I get the gist of it, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as knowing whether or not you were scared by this stuff or excited by it, you kind of actually flipped it on me, and you said you're more excited by it first and then got scared as you got older and understood more of it. That's kind of interesting. You had your mother to share this with. I'm guessing she was not afraid of horror. She enjoyed it.
Oh, no, yeah. My mother, she had like just every Stephen King book, every Koontz book. Some Barker.
So did she say anything to you or kind of educate you on how to approach the material to say that this isn't something to be scared of, or?
Not really. My mother was, she was a person you kind of hung out with. She didn't like imparting lessons to kids. And I'm not saying that as a value judgment. It's just like some parents are, just trying to get along and go through their lives and like make sure your kid doesn't die. But
yeah,
I
didn't mean it in the sense of her sitting you down and having a discussion with you about it. Even one comment offhanded can be a lot to a kid.
Oh no,
sometimes.
Absolutely. And that didn't really happen much. No, it's a thing I developed. I developed largely on my own because I was sorting through things and kind of just had this librarian impulse. And so I learned about criticism from this librarian impulse because I wanted to know as much as possible about the thing, but realized that like just looking at lists of stuff isn't gonna teach you everything you need to know. No, so I decided to go into analysis more.
And I guess in a different way of looking at it, her sort of Leslie's fair attitude about
exactly. It was good for me in some ways.
In its own way. Yeah. Did any of this stuff trigger any lasting fears that have stuck with you?
Generally, I think they agitated fears that I already had in certain ways.
Would you mind sharing what those are?
Oh no, not at all. I have kind of I have this body snatcher thing because of my general distrust of other human beings and seeing like how quickly they could flip. So I got that through Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I got that through Stepford Wives. I got that through Rosemary's Baby. Funny Games later hit me really hard on that one. Sudden unpredictable human behavior is a thing I find scarier than almost anything else, really. Like
for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had very it's kind of a rough thing when you're like when you're like in Boston and Portland, because you just suddenly encounter people who are kind of on the verge of seeming like they've been body snatched or something. You get
Drugs.
no, definitely drugs, mental illness, yeah. No, you get people with just like weird, sudden, herky jerky movements who are talking utter nonsense at you, and that's like,
Especially in the 80s.
yeah, that is true, and that's yeah. So I think that's I think the big thing for me is just the inconstancy of human beings and their and their potential to engage in very disorganized and harmful behavior.
Yeah, and I can see how that ties into,
Yeah, wanting moral order, definitely.
well, that too, but I was thinking lack of control, which
Yeah.
then leads to wanting more order and power to control the order and make sense of the, smooth out the imperfections as it might be.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. The idea that like that you frequently have to count on other people is still a scary thing for me.
Yeah, there's a challenge of being, overly dependent, overly independent, and then, the healthy thing is to be somewhere in the middle. But how do you find that? How do you gauge it? How do you learn it if you haven't been taught it? It's a difficult thing. Did you participate in Halloween as a kid?
Oh, we loved Halloween. We were so into Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It
I'm so close to
was
say one.
actually part of why the hardcore Christians considered our house a devil house.
Okay, explain that.
Like we had serious Halloween decorations.
Okay.
We had wooden tombstones. We had bodies on the lawn.
Mhm.
We had turned a couple of hat racks with just some cloaks and stuff, and a wedding dress into to kind of like a Grim Reaper wedding outside.
Ooh.
And we were in constant competition with our neighbors across the street, who were substantially richer but much less resourceful than we were.
Mm.
And we made the front page of our local paper a few times with our Halloween decorations. They made the front page of our local paper a few times with their Halloween decorations. But it was absolutely war every year.
Like the Halloween version of the Christmas lights war, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't give a fuck about Christmas lights.
Did you have a favorite costume or favorite decoration?
I really enjoyed just watching and creating the makeshift corpses and stuffing them with like newspaper and soda bottles and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Just the idea that like clothes and some fake blood and some tempera paint could suddenly turn into a dead human being that's sitting on your lawn
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of fun.
It's like the Christmas gift I gave Chris a couple years ago.
Yeah. It's a
Nice.
it's a skeleton fully clothed and also stuffed with newspaper, but all wrapped up in garbage bags and then wrapped up with like tinsel garland with a giant bow on it. It's just like, this is the best Christmas present ever. It's a dead body.
I end up being able to put this knowledge to use in college when I got to plan the college Halloween party, and I wanted to do something that was like historical and impactful
Okay.
and sad and kind of angry at the same time as awesome Halloween decorations. So we recreated the crime scenes from the Whitechapel murders, including Ripper graffiti, and just created dead prostitutes stuffed with livers acquired from Hannafords and such, just all around the place, posed in similar manners to the 5 canonical Ripper victims.
Nice.
So I imagine it was a really weird thing to be stumbling through drunk and super high, and I kind of enjoyed that as well.
Yeah,
because it's just fun knowing that you're fucking with your classmates while they're really high.
Well, was there ever a time when you were really terrified of something as a child in real life?
My grandfather was in a psych ward a couple of times. I went to visit him once.
Mm-hmm.
The neighbor who brought me lost track of me. And it's hilarious, yeah. I was left wandering around the psych ward.
Jesus.
Trying to find my grandfather.
Okay. I am curious, you mentioning this now, you also mentioned that you saw Hellraiser at a young age. Had you seen Hellraiser 2 at a young age? And if so, did that one scene maybe trigger some
when
memories?
When I finally saw Hellraiser 2, that brought back some memories.
Right? Walking down a corridor, hearing people screaming behind walls or behind doors left and right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was exactly it. And I was seeing people just suddenly just transform before my eyes, and I was just trying to bring my grandfather some fucking candy.
And I'm just imagining like the staff watching you walk down the halls and just letting you go, like
yeah, right. Like, oh, there's another one. He's cool. It's fine.
Yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, like a lot of my life, I was about 9. A lot of my life was like, is an adult going to intervene at some point?
Exactly.
Is a good description of my childhood. Someone probably should. And then I just like shrug, like, I guess an adult is not going to intervene. My parents did what they could, but like sometimes, there are situations where an adult is not going to intervene, and like your neighbor drops the ball and you're wandering around the psych ward just trying to bring your grandfather some Boston baked beans.
Yeah, I mean that's another element of it too, like just letting your neighbor take your kid to see his grandfather in a psych ward. That unless they were really good friends, they
were really good friends. Weird. They were the neighbors who we had the Halloween prank, the Halloween decoration war with. It was. I kind of figured you. It was a friendly duel.
Just imagining that conversation. Hey, would you mind taking my kid to the psych ward to see his grandfather?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
You want me to stop off at the slaughterhouse on the way, or maybe the local prison?
Yeah.
Well, let's go to Crack Out.
I mean,
yeah, spooky roller disco.
In retrospect, if it was the neighbor that was having the horror battle with them, it's the neighbor probably wouldn't have a problem with you. Oh yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, exactly.
They probably looked at it as oh great, I get to go to a psych ward.
Yeah, this town was.
That's why they lost you. They were wandering around checking shit out.
Yeah. Yeah, in some ways, this town was classified by a combination of violent curiosity and flat affect.
Yeah.
Like, just very, New Englanders are really stoic. It's just okay when horrible things happen.
Yeah, you get over it.
Yeah. Walk it off.
Yeah, walk it off, exactly. That's the state motto of Massachusetts.
So, if you were to summarize what it was about horror that made you happy as a child, how would you summarize that?
What made me happy as a child was feeling at home, feeling like the world made sense, and just feeling like awesome shit happened. Like skeletons ran around killing people.
Mm-hmm.
It was a world where there were like giant monsters and skeletons and shit, and that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Divorced to the value judgments, and then like I got smart enough to understand what I was looking at, and then I stopped and grew more introspective about it, but not less curious.
Yeah, that's how that's reasoning comes up a lot, I think, when it comes to what exactly was it about horror at an early age or at any age that interested you. And I think I myself said this as well, and it's just that some of the stuff just looks cool. Sometimes it's just the efficacy of the makeup design, or like a cool werewolf transformation, that it just looks interesting. So you forget about the macabre and the horrible things that are happening for a minute. You're like, wow, that looks awesome.
And when you're a kid, it's kind of like being in international waters. Like, there's not necessarily repercussions. You recover quickly and everything goes. And anything goes, really.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have less empathy for things that happen to people on a screen when you're a little kid, too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say there's a lot of adults that don't have much empathy for things.
That's true, too.
Yeah. Those are called sociopaths.
That is true, yeah.
So what were some of the scary stories or books or movies that influenced you during your teenage years?
Well, I read Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie, and it's her work is fantastic. She really gets into that that antisocial core and the breakdown of morals and the breakdown of human minds, and just has a real psychosexual intensity to all her stuff. Like, I love her book Haunted Tales of the Grotesque. That collection was amazing and huge influence on me because it combined really beautiful, really aesthetic writing and good strong rhythm. I have a poetry background as well, so I love strong rhythms. And her work it was so pleasing to me in so many ways because she was capable of beautifully describing and beautifully depicting horrific things happening. That's kind of where that's kind of where I have a lot more patience for Argento than I kind of feel like I should sometimes. Because like Italian horror, it's so aesthetically beautiful, and then like if you start thinking about what's happening on the screen, you can completely lose it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of Italian horror is just like that. It's like great visual aspects and lighting, and visually it looks spectacular. And you get wrapped up in that, but the moment you start thinking about the plot, you're like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the psychology in particular. There's some really funny psychological leaps, like in Torso. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not seen that one. It's on my list. I've been meaning to get around to it.
It's I'm not going to spoil it, but like when you see the end of Torso and why it was done, you are probably going to laugh your ass off.
Okay.
Like these motivations and what happened to bring about these motivations are so hilariously disparate that like
fucking change the toilet paper roll.
Or even worse,
it's of that level.
It goes over the top.
Yeah. And this frequently happened, and yeah, that frequently is the sort of thing in Giallo. It was like, I gave my son a doll once.
And now he's killing people.
He's killed like 13 nude models because of it. Because he just wants to have a doll again. That's the sort of like...
Their heads never go on quite the same afterwards.
Yeah. But I enjoy really aesthetic depictions of really terrible things. And Oates was a master of that. I really enjoyed Lovecraft when I first encountered Lovecraft, like as a preteen. I still really enjoy Lovecraft in certain ways, but like there's ways in which he is tremendously lazy intellectually, and ways in which he is a very rigorous world builder.
You're not the first person to say that, but go ahead.
And they sometimes happen in the same, the same story, in the same sentence, yeah. And there's something admirable about his use of negative space. I think actually is a very important part of the arts, and is a very important phenomenon in the arts.
This kind of ties back in with what you were saying a moment ago about wanting to know what great art was. Was there some maybe member of your family that impressed you on great art, or was that just something you picked up on your own?
My family is just very, very heavy into collecting books. They went to flea markets and such, acquired large lots of volumes. And my grandfather, whose house we all lived in, just thought it was very important to have a ton of books around. He didn't necessarily read all of them or understand all of them or care about all of them. He was a dude who grew up at a dairy farm in Vermont that would one day become a ski resort, and then he went and became a jet engineer because he had an IQ in the 200s, and became fascinated with collecting books. And so there were all these books and all these videos, and I kind of, in some ways, I grew up inside a library.
Neat.
And that was great, yeah. Like, it was a horrifying library that made terrible, weird noises, and sometimes you would feel profoundly like you weren't alone, and you'd see, like, a tall guy in a dark hat glaring at you out of the corner of your eye.
Which was not your grandpa?
No, my grandfather was, 5'6". This dude was, 6'7".
All right, so at this point you said, I guess, already starting to get more scared of things. You're starting to, intellectualize and start to understand Well, actually, I mean, based on some of the stuff you were saying, seeing it even 8 and 11. I mean, I guess there's some point where you had already started doing that, and now you're sort of exploring the art of it.
Yeah, I was less serious about horror and more serious about lit fic as a teenager, and then my first year of college, I got back into my interest in horror because I realized that my work was too heavily infused with horror. That I wasn't writing literary fiction at all,
and you decided to dive.
I decided to lean into what I do well. And what I'm actually interested in, stop lying about what I want my work to look like.
Yeah, so there wasn't.
And I think that's an important thing for any artist.
Yeah, so yeah, there wasn't like necessarily a catalyst that got you back into writing horror. It was just like you know what, I think this is my my core interest. So you just decided to return to it because it was more.
Well, also like people who were critiquing my lit fic were just always saying like this is horrifying and repulsive.
And you're like,
these people are not. These people are not ethical.
Right? Like
exactly.
This is my basic stuff. You want to see horrifying and repulsive? God, no one's even gotten skinned alive in this
yet.
Yeah. No. Well, that was kind of where their issues started. I was very unaware of the amount of violence and the amount of like normalized perversity in my work, and that it was going to be jarring to readers.
Like,
in the same way, like
fine.
my mom, like I think in some ways, like I am like my mom in that my mother was a very unsuccessful mystery writer because she did not understand what mystery stories were like. They were like her mystery stories were like H.G. Lewis novels or like H.G. Lewis movies, but infused with like real true crime stuff. Mm-hmm. So it had the motivations of like a commercial crime thriller, like, oh, this guy's just in love with you. But instead, like the reporter who like the killer is in love with just leaves like someone's head full of jizz in her fridge.
I was just gonna say, Chris
and
would
so
like
it's
that
just
book.
like this. This is not like yeah. Oh no, it was in some ways very awesome, and it actually led me to appreciate H.G. Lewis when I saw it because there's a certain amount of grindhouse tone deaf to the way she was trying to tell a commercial mystery novel. Everything was just way too fucking horrifying for a commercial mystery novel.
She was ahead of her time,
and it was kind of funny, and I didn't realize until I was writing like so-called literary fiction that like I was so heavily infused with horror.
Yeah. What? This is just what our family does. From that.
Yeah. This is exactly. This is just our Addams Family shit.
Did you participate in Halloween as a teen?
I still enjoyed dressing up for Halloween. I enjoyed taking part in the decorations. It was tough parking wise and such, of course, but like Salem is fucking magic at Halloween.
True.
Yeah, I bet.
And I loved Salem at Halloween. I applied for a job working at the Witch Museum, but that didn't manage to pan out.
Nice. Oh, you know what? One question I forgot to ask about going back to childhood. Any scary dreams or reoccurring dreams?
Yeah, I had sleep paralysis.
Oh no!
As a child? That's not common.
No, it's not. Yeah, surgeons.
Surgeons?
Yeah. Just like with the scalpels and shit.
Oh, you mean the dreams?
The dreams, yeah. Sleep paralysis dreams, yeah. And they just like go to work.
Well, yeah, that's a new twist on the sleep paralysis dreams. Usually people are saying, it's just some dark figure standing over their bed and they can't move. You were being operated on and not able to move.
I fucking wish. Yeah, no, that was like when I saw The Nightmare. That was like it was good to have some solidarity there because like there were some people who saw like the really freaky shit. And I'm like, good. I'm glad I wasn't alone in the really freaky shit from sleep paralysis. Yeah. But yeah, so that was one of the main ones. And I never met my father, so I frequently had dreams about my father being just something that wasn't a person.
Oh, I didn't realize you had never met your father.
Oh yes, yeah. I frequently had dreams about that he was just not a person, and that I was by extension not a person.
That's interesting. So yeah, I was thinking you were gonna say it was like the paralysis dreams that I said other people have had, where you have that figure standing over the bed, and maybe he doesn't have a face because you never saw the face, but you took that a step further in the fact that the concept of your father was in the dream, but not a person, and therefore you being his offspring were also not a person. That's how old were you when you had these dreams? Because that's pretty deep.
I had them probably from about like 5 to 10.
Huh.
Like I would just understand that like I knew I didn't have a father, and I knew that like there was some sort of weird secret. It was kind of funny. My mother, because she was stationed in Arizona in the Marines,
mm-hmm.
and there was a photo of her with Billy D. Williams because they were filming Return of the Jedi at the time.
Nice.
And so I saw this photo, and as a small child, for like 3 days, I thought my dad was Billy D. Williams.
Your dad is Lando Calrissian.
And I thought like, and I thought my mother was just ashamed that he betrayed his best friend to the Empire. So like for 3 days, I thought my dad was Billy D. Williams.
Seems like something a child would think, yeah.
No, exactly. And then my mother was
that's why she left him.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, I know you're a child, but like, damn, that's really dumb.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Well, that's just... We had radical and honest communication, to say the least, in my household.
She was a Marine.
Yeah, she was. No, exactly. Counterintelligence. Yeah. So, like, I knew growing up that, like, I would not be able to get away with shit.
Let's see. Did anything in your teenage years trigger any fears that new fears, existing fears?
I spent some time in a wheelchair senior year of high school because I worked really hard to lose weight. I lost 68 pounds over the course of one summer.
Wow.
By walking 24 miles a day.
That'll do it.
There was nobody to alert me, though, that...
You'd be damaging your knees?
A 300-pound... Yeah, no, exactly. That a 300-pound 17-year-old going down to 230 pounds should not walk 24 miles a day. Yeah, I got a severe stress fracture, left distal tibia, and was put in a wheelchair and prescribed diazepam for my anxiety. Because oncologists are not the best on bedside manner. So I spent the first half of my senior year in a wheelchair, very, very doped up, and had a lot of dreams about that, and still have a big obsession with body horror and like the body's capacity to betray us.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously I love Cronenberg for that.
Oh yes.
Because he's all about body treason in every possible way. And Tetsuo and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about body horror in that light. I mean, I've always understood that body horror is that visceral and effective because it's invasive. It brings the horror or the discomfort really close to home, and the fact that you're watching something where someone's body is very intimate. But there is that aspect you just mentioned of it's a way of your body betraying you because, say like in a Cronenberg film where someone's flesh is twisted into some malformation that they didn't want or they didn't expect.
No,
you
exactly.
expect your body to behave and act normal. And I guess in a way that kind of brings it, I don't want to keep saying this phrase, but close to home, for lack of a better term. In another way, as you're older too, because that is a very real horror that your body starts betraying you. Like you can't
exactly
get up without grunting, or you get random pains in your back after you're 40 or older. The thing that previously was a powerhouse and invincible is now saying nah, I'm gonna fuck up now occasionally at random.
Yeah, because so much horror is, I think, really strong because it capitalizes and deals with our lack of trust in an institution or an idea or a person.
Mm-hmm.
But like the really, really intense stuff frequently is about you can't trust you.
Yeah.
Like you've got, I mean, that's the lycanthrope stories. That's the body horror story. Is the idea that you can't even count on yourself anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a really scary premise.
It is.
Like for anybody who has had to be independent in any way. The idea that, like, the last person you don't have that guy. that guy's not even on your side anymore.
Well,
it's not 7 billion to 1, it's 7 billion and 1
to 1. Yeah.
to you.
You know, anybody who has ever leaned back too far in a chair knows the feeling of that moment where you just know you're about to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in general, whether you want to call it horror or not, losing something that you used to trust and realizing that you can't trust it anymore is like that moment.
Yeah.
It's that initial fear of, oh shit, what's about to happen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you cross over that thing that you could trust before, you can no longer trust. Everything is unknown. It's the only known is that you can't trust it anymore, and the big unknown is what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it makes the sole truth. It makes the sole truth of the world a predatory cosmos.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that makes sense too. The wheelchair dream, fear of crippling yourself, also ties in with power or the lack of thereof. Losing.
Generally like a lack of power, a lack of agency.
Yeah, starting to see some common themes.
Definitely. Yeah.
Let's move into adulthood. So you mentioned that you had started writing more horror in your adult years. Did you? Well, actually, I guess we could back up a second and say I'm guessing you started writing in your teenage years.
My first I got the first draft of my first novel. I finished at 17.
Okay.
I continued trying to refine that into my 20s until I destroyed the 3.5-inch floppy that contained it by accident.
No.
And that was an act of that was an errand of mercy. Basically, like I should write something any human would want to read. That might be nice. I could try that. And then I tried that and wrote a book called Murderland that was about an alternate America where serial killing was legal in certain areas that were called safe zones. And the protagonist was
ironically,
right?
Yeah. No, exactly. Because I felt like society bends over backwards for predators, but cares a lot less about victims. And so Murderland was basically about like a society where the sympathy for the predator has become complete, and serial killers are like celebrity athletes and like on Wheaties boxes and shit.
Oh God!
And are followed, and are rock stars.
Did that ever get published, or?
It did, yeah. It was actually the thing that introduced me to the Bizarro scene.
How old were you at that time?
I was 25.
Okay.
When Murderland came out, and I first started doing readings with other Bizarro authors, and attended the first Bizarro Con, and found out that like I had a home there.
Right. So let's. How can I say this? I want to kind of step back for a second and talk about things that you were a fan of.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your adult years now, I think you had mentioned that you had started doing the translation of Dante's comedy. I think that falls under.
That was in college, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What else? What else have you been a fan of in your adult years in terms of horror?
Virtually everything. And when I say virtually everything, like, I mean it. Not like those people who are like, I like everything but country and rap.
I would say pick the top 3 things that come off your head, because usually those are the most true.
Okay, top 3 things that come off of my head. Jörg Buttgereit. Like, Necromantic, Der Todesking. Fucking love that guy. I would say, to a lesser extent, Von Trier. But, I love A24 movies, Hereditary and Midsummer and such. I like Ari Aster a lot. Japanese horror from the 60s that's not necessarily Godzilla based, like Gokei Body Snatcher from Hell I like a lot, and by extension Takashi Miike. Val Lewton. Huge fan of everything Lewton affiliated. 30s pre-code horror.
Okay.
Mad Love is like one of my favorite films of all time. I fucking just love that movie so much.
And what do you love about these things that you've just mentioned? Like starting with Necromantic?
Necromantic I love because it's body horror, and because it takes something that's like reprehensible and makes it life affirming. The end of Necromantic and the end of Ulysses, I feel, are kind of similar. Like, the last phrase of Ulysses is, yes, I said yes, I said yes. And when you watch the end of Necromantic, I feel similarly invigorated. I feel similarly life affirmed. And I feel like I've gotten close to death and walked away from it. And, like, I feel like, like I could punch out the sun and just, like, fuck all day when I'm finished watching Necromantic. Necromantic is fucking boss.
What about it is life affirming to you?
Just the ending where the character just finds the capacity to enjoy himself and find satisfaction on his terms. The way this person has interwoven like love and death, just kind of skirted the knife edge between living and the dying, and found something beautiful there, as repugnant and grotesque and morally wrong as that place he's been to was. And I find that something like very beautiful and very like comic and positive. I feel like I don't know. I feel like there's a positivity to Necromantic that I like a lot that I didn't necessarily see in Necromantic 2, which a lot of fans of Butker say is the better movie.
What about Von Trier?
Von Trier, I obviously I don't like him as a human being or like any statements he makes, and I think that man should stay as far away from microphone as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Just whenever he can. But Antichrist is a Dantesque experience, I think.
I will never look at a 2x4 the same way again. Oof.
You walk out of it, and you're different at the end of it a little bit.
Yep.
You just survived a thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really beautiful experience to be able to put someone through like that kind of challenge and let them see what's on the other side of it. Gaspar Noé, I think, did a good job with that. Mm-hmm. Though I thought, I don't know, a lot of people like Climax, but I thought it was up its own ass. And there was like a Reefer Madness vibe to it.
I have yet to watch Climax. I've read the synopsis.
That I didn't care for.
It just seems
because like this isn't what simple. LSD does.
No,
I have no particular issue with hallucinogens. I think hallucinogens are cool, and I felt that Climax was a little rough on hallucinogens. But I feel that Irreversible is just like a beautiful, sad, intense, wonderful film.
Another one to get around to watching.
It's a hell of a thing.
I just can't get in the mood to sit down and watch something that potentially has like a 10-minute long reverse rape scene.
No, exactly. It's very hard to be in a mood where you're ready for someone to ruin your day.
Yeah. Like I want to feel ill. Let's watch this film.
Exactly. Like
I thought you were like
such
that,
a pitch battle.
Not lately.
Not lately.
Yeah, for some reason.
Yeah. He's got enough real stress going on in his life.
Yeah.
Okay, next on your list was Ari Aster. I just fucked that up twice. Ari Aster.
Yeah,
Hereditary Midsommar.
I like that he tells stories about kind of the burden, the burden of that generations put on each other.
Yeah.
Like Hereditary is this wonderful story about like all that shit that your parents say they did that was for you, and you don't understand any of it, and it's made the world objectively worse.
Yeah.
And that's just like every boomer congressman who you see like talking about like we worked so hard for all of this, and then you look around at what the world looks like, and it's like, did you though?
Yeah.
No, they did. Like, they were just wrong.
No. Yeah. It's just like we wanted none of this. And Hereditary is just like such a great movie about like a generation.
No, right. They were just not doing it for you. They were doing it for their kids.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like we did this for you.
We didn't do this for you. We did this for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think and so I like that a lot about Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
And Midsummer, like...
Midsummer was interesting. It's good
I
once you
found
get
it
past the fact that it's supposed
very
to be
life-affirming.
A story, and it's more an allegory for failed relationships. Once you know that aspect of it, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Yep. I do resent that they ruined a perfectly good bear with their garbage. I think you should not stuff your garbage into a perfectly good bear. And that's my one moral objection I have to people in Midsummer.
I was wondering where you're going.
I think that's going to be the audio clip for this interview.
Yes. Who put all this garbage in this bear?
God damn it. It was such a great
nothing else away from this movie.
Yeah. Just let the bear be.
Yeah.
Right? What did the bear do to you? So we've kind of talked about both what you were excited by and turned off by about a couple of these things. It sounds like you do have a social element now in terms of having other people that you know who are into horror, which is
I like that. I like that a lot. I actually I live with the guy who wrote Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Really.
He's a New York Times bestselling author of The Light at the End, which is a brilliant book, and he directed a segment of Tales from Halloween. But we live together and watch a lot of weird horror stuff.
All right. So there's some interesting comments from the adult section here about what you liked about horror, finding enjoyment, beauty on a person's own terms, life affirming. I'm trying to think how to connect going from fears of, loss of power, loss of control. Well, I guess life affirming is finding that.
Yeah, no,
sense
exactly.
Of control.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I went from as a young person, just finding things like ideologically terrifying in horror films and gravitating towards those, and gravitating instead towards things that actually that make me feel good, but in weird ways.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask two questions that are not necessarily tied to horror. This is crossing any genre and also not relating to any time of your life, but across your entire life. I'll ask both questions at the same time because the answer could be the same or they could be different. First question is, what is your favorite movie? Second question is, what movie have you watched more times than any other?
My favorite film is actually It's a Wonderful Life.
Huh.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's, for one thing, it's socialist propaganda. Yeah. It is life affirming, and it just they're just great acting moments where you see Jimmy Stewart break down. When you see Jimmy Stewart loses shit, it's really intense. I love that in Vertigo, and I love that in It's a Wonderful Life when he's just when he's yelling at his kids and he's at the lowest moment. I find that really beautiful.
He is a great actor.
He was amazing, yeah. And the film I've watched the most is probably Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster.
Okay.
Because I love that monster talk scene, and I love just fights with King Ghidorah. No, wait, actually, mathematically, it's Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is the film I have watched the most.
I've never even heard of that one, but that's a nice title.
One time I was really sick on cough syrup, and so I watched it for an entire day. My girlfriend and I continue to watch it whenever it's on or whenever I see it associated with things, and watch all the riffs of it.
It's a good Christmas
movie. It's just it's a good weird ass Christmas movie. Actually, yeah, it's weird that the films I watch most frequently and that are my favorite films are Christmas movies, even though I kind of don't care for Christmas. But yeah, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, I think I've seen the most. It doesn't make it good. I don't recommend people watching it. It's just the thing that I have watched more frequently than other films.
what do you like about that one? Was it, other than just saying that it's weird, is there something you can put your finger on?
I think like I love the fake polar bear suit. Like fake bear suits, anything with a fake bear suit, I do enjoy on some level, like Midsummer, for example.
Hey, what's with the bears?
I don't know. I just think they're funny. I just think it's really funny when someone's in a bear suit. I don't know why it's like the silliest thing in the world to me.
Okay.
But like there's just something really funny about circumstances when you can use a real animal and you use a guy in a suit instead.
It's like
bears are real.
They are.
Like it's not a dragon, dude. Like you can find a guy who owns a bear.
So what
and
about
they chose not to.
What about that 2-second clip in The Shining?
That 2-second clip in The Shining, that's actually that falls more under the unsettling human behavior.
I would say that's like half furry, half uncanny valley kind of.
That's this guy's doing. Yeah, that's kind of not cool. What the fuck is going on there?
Yeah.
I want no part of that.
Yeah. Okay. Back to Santa Conquers the Martians.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just there's just a preponderance of really dumb lines, and I love little bits of dumb dialogue. Like, Droppo, you're the laziest man on Mars. Just every time it gets me. Just the idea that someone's made a value judgment about someone being the laziest man on Mars, and just the anger created by that. Like, I love when people make hardcore value judgments about someone in a sci-fi movie in a fist-shaking way, and therefore end up making stupid phrases come out of their mouth. Like in Zontar, the Thing from Venus, John Agar says to his friend, "You're a traitor, Keith, the most diabolical traitor mankind has ever known." It's like, wow, that's a really stupid thing you just said. And I love when weird phrases come out of people's mouths in that way.
Yeah.
And Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is just full of dialogue that does not seem to have been written by a reasonable human being. And I love listening to dialogue that was not written by a reasonable human being. There's a strange poetry to it.
Okay. So of these three movies, we've got life affirming and great acting moments. There's I guess the power of the monsters and the justice from that part of the conversation, and just humor and fun.
Yeah.
So now that we've narrowed in on what it is that you enjoy, the last question is why horror? Because could you not find some of these things in other genres? Like, for example, life-affirming stuff you could find in probably a lot of different genres. The power and control definitely comes from, you can find elements of that in all kinds of different genres. Humor, same thing.
It acknowledges that life is horrifying. It acknowledges that reality is not real. And when you say that life is horrifying, but you feel like it's okay that life is horrifying by the end of the film, instead of negating the idea that life is horrifying, I think there's something really powerful to it that I kind of key in on and I like a lot. Because other film genres that try to be life-affirming try to do so by denying suffering and by denying insanity and by
But does it? Because I mean, I'm thinking a lot of tragic dramas do the same thing without showing the blood and guts. No?
I think that there's just...
I mean, the first example that comes off the top of my head would be shit. I can't think of the name of the night.
Magnolia,
Vincent D'Onofrio, Joker. Yeah. What the hell is Full Metal Jacket?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Full Metal Jacket has definite moments of horror in it.
Yeah, I would say Full Metal Jacket
moments of reality breaking down and moments of insanity.
Bordering on it, but I wouldn't call it a horror movie. But it touches.
I wouldn't
on all
call it a horror
things
movie
that you're talking about.
Yeah,
it evokes some of those feelings, but I think that it doesn't become affirming.
Yeah.
It says Vietnam was terrible.
Well,
crickets.
Well, no. Well, hang on. I mean, so there's but you're focusing on it not affirming Vietnam. That doesn't mean it's not affirming life.
I mean, in some ways, you're grateful that you're not in Vietnam by the end of Full Metal Jacket. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Just like you're glad that you're not in the Hellraiser world, or
maybe, but I think that there's a security to the alternate moral order of the horror universe that I find a lot more reassuring and a lot more approachable than things set in the real world. Because I feel like things set in the real world don't capture how scary the real world is. But I feel that horror captures how scary the real world is. But that it's kind of okay sometimes. I feel like just depicting something on screen, there's a certain amount of psychic distance you create. So I think hyperbole helps bridge that gap.
Yeah, but
and horror is inherently hyperbolic.
But there too, I feel like, we talked about how in horror there are movies where, yes, there's that clear moral order, and also movies where there isn't. But I feel like that also is true in non-horror genres too. There are movies
that is true. I see it. I feel like I see it best in horror films because I feel like just asserting that the assertion that life is hell and it's okay that life is hell and you can sort through it.
Maybe it's more that it's more violently hell.
It's more that it's more. It's easier to track that it's hell. It's more there and it's more present and it's more visceral.
Literally,
yeah. Literally visceral, yeah. And I appreciate that aspect. The feeling that you're definitely in hell, because I feel like it captures just how bad things are through a sense of hyperbole and through the capacity to recontextualize it instead of just looking directly at it. I think it's good to have the poetics there. I think the poetics makes it a lot more watchable and a lot more interesting for me than just seeing human beings suffer. I think I need a certain amount of poetry.
Well,
and I think I need
hold
a
that
certain
thought
amount
for a
of
second. Hold the thought on the poetry. What I'm still going back to the visceral part of it and thinking, okay, so that gives it more powerful imagery, which maybe helps the poetry in that it makes it clearer.
It makes it clearer, and it's a might as well be.
What do you mean might as well be?
If you just show Godzilla is kind of a might as well for the atomic bomb. The A-bomb might as well have been a 400-foot dinosaur that melts your city with fire.
Symbolically, you mean?
Symbolically, yeah. The British ruling over your country and exploiting your people might as well be a vampire lord from Transylvania coming to take your women.
What I would say to this is you're talking about the difference between symbolism and concrete imagery.
Yes.
And arguments could be made for the benefit of either. But in your case, I'm guessing it sounds like maybe there is some personal attachment to intelligence that makes you say, I would rather have it be symbolic and intelligent, in your view, at least more intelligent than concrete. Like, because there are other people. I would rather have it.
I prefer the abstraction. Yeah, I prefer the poetics.
Okay,
and I think that's. I find the poetics to be more truthful than just watching the thing, because for me that bridges the gap between the event and the camera that you've had to put in front of it, or the page you've had to write it down on. I feel like there's, like every time I watch a thing about the Holocaust, I know that this can't possibly feel as bad as the Holocaust. You would have to come up with an amazing bit of symbology to really capture how bad that should feel. I know I'm looking at this and I'm feeling like 0.01% of the terror that actually got inflicted in the real world. And so...
Yeah, I'm not sure there is anything that could be symbolic.
No, it's true. That's why Benjamin Adorno's like there could be no poetry after the Holocaust. Because they thought that there's nothing that could capture this. was so prevalent in that particular philosopher's thought.
Mm.
So I feel like you need to use some amount of poetics to bridge that gap successfully.
Last question.
Mhm.
Considering the theme of the podcast, is there anything relevant about your thoughts or feelings, or how you approach the world that you think is relevant to the kinds of conversation that we're having that we haven't talked about?
No, I think this has been a great. I think this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you guys. You've asked really good questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
I like the questions you asked, and I liked responding to them. I mean, we're at 2 hours and 45 minutes, so clearly,
Yes.
It's about a middle range of the length of our podcasts. We've had longer.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Yeah.
So I've really so I've definitely felt that you've hit on the very very interesting things here.
And might I say, I am very impressed with your lexicon, sir.
Oh, well, thank you.
You know
try.
big words.
It helps when you're a writer.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were to summarize, power, uncertainty, loss of power or control.
Yeah.
Maybe control is better than power, because power helps with the control.
Yeah, loss of control.
And life affirming would be the summary I would come up with for what it is you like about horror. Yeah,
horror makes it okay that to a certain extent that the world is hell, or at least better equips you for the fact that we are walking around in what isn't the worst of all possible worlds, but
also
certainly is not the best one.
Yeah. True.
And I think horror bridges that gap and gives us equipment that we need to understand it, to understand hell.
Before we close the call, do you want to pitch anything on the way out?
Getting ready to turn in my next book, which is gonna hit in October. It's called Charcoal, and it's kind of a splat punk variation of sort of Faust and the picture of Dorian Gray, about a set of charcoals possessed by the worst, most wicked Victorian libertine artist that Vincent Price never lived to play. And a young woman's experience with an interchange with the potential immorality and cruelty of art.
Ooh, now that sounds fun.
Well, looking at the calendar, this would probably get released June, July, August, maybe. So,
oh, nice. Yeah, that's there will be some ARCs probably around then.
Cool. Yeah. So, thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you for this. This was great.
Yeah. And thank you to anybody out there listening. Again, please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We have a list of the people we like to interview. If you can help us connect with any of them or know somebody you'd like to have added to the list, let us know. You can hit us up on social media. Let us know how we're doing. Horrormakesushappy.com.